Hello everyone. My name is Matt Rodriguez, and I'm doing my presentation on Ivan Pavlov's theories on behavior and social learning. Now, who is Ivan Pavlov? Pavlov was born in 1849. He was known as one of the most famous Russian scientists of all time. Some of his work that he did back then is some of the work that we still use today. We still follow some of his studying and his research. He originally got started with he's known for his research on human digestion. That's actually how he got his name. And from there on out, after this, he decided to change his work into psychological research after what he discovered, what we still know today as his conditioning theory. Now, what was his conditioning theory? Ivan Pavlov's conditioning theory was based on an idea with behaviors being instinctive, meaning there was no distinction between them, between reflexive and common nature. Okay? This movement and this psychological research that he decided to go through came after his discovery of the connection between dogs and human interactions. He found ways that they were very similar as far as their behaviors and how they acted, and the ways that they could be taught and not taught. Now, this theory that he came up with, where all this came from, is it's known as Pavlov's dogs. This is the huge experiment that he came up with, where the social and behavioral interactions from which education is founded on part of the things that we use in our classrooms today. With this experiment, it's known as his famous experiment, and the predecessor to his findings, all he was doing was studying the rate of saliva in dogs and how quickly they salivate. His methodology based on what he used for this was a bell. He used a bell to see for feeding time, so the dogs knew. He was teaching the behavior that when the dogs heard the bell, they now knew that it was feeding time. Over time, the more and more that he did this, he started to figure out that by just ringing the bell, the dogs associated that with feeding time, and that's when they would start salivating. He was able to do this even when there was no food presented. This is what we know today as the conditional reflex. Now, why does this matter? We're talking about dogs. This is an education course. Now, while the study came from examining dogs, the idea that came behind it is that it can directly be related to humans and human activity. Okay? These findings were the result in evolution of Pavlov's social and behavioral theories that we still use today. His theories. Now, from a completely different experiment came what is still known today as these behavior and social theories that we use. The basis of these theories is, like I said, is that behavior can be taught, untaught, learned, and unlearned, meaning we're changing good behavior, allowing for good behavior and changing bad behaviors. Okay? Another point is that when these behaviors become unacceptable, they become unlearned. When a student is doing something that's unacceptable, we have to find ways to unteach it. At the same time, when a behavior is deemed acceptable, we use it a way as to teach it. Now, the continuation of these theories. In regards to positive and negative behavior, Pavlov noted that a reward and consequence system could be used to change and teach these behaviors that are desired and what we're looking for. This theory and idea is very popular, and it is credited to be valuable in both a clinical setting and academic setting, meaning in every aspect of life we can use these settings. We can use it with our children, we can use it with our students, okay? The use of it is so wide and so vast. It can be used to not only educate and create these correct behaviors that we're looking for, but we can also change the bad ones. So, how do we apply this as educators? This is ultimately what we're looking for. Okay, there are two different types of learning associated with these behaviors and these social learning needs that we find with the students. The two foundations that came from Pavlov's behavioral and social learning ideas are the classical conditioning, which we already talked about earlier, and this operant conditioning. Now, what is classical conditioning? This is what we talked about earlier with the Pavlov's dogs and there being a direct correlation between what is known as classical conditioning and his experiment. With this experiment, we found that behavior can be taught or untaught using different forms of association, such as the bell he did with the dogs. This theory has no direct consequences, just an objective to relate to behavior. The other side of this is operant conditioning. As I go into this, you're going to start to understand and realize this is something that we use as educators more often than not, and we've also probably used it as parents in our home. Unlike conditional conditioning, classical conditioning, operant uses both positive and negative consequences to encourage and discourage certain behaviors. So we're not only rewarding the good behaviors, we're finding ways to punish the bad behaviors as well. Like I said, does it sound familiar? It should. It's the most common, most effective of classroom techniques. We all use it in some sort in our classrooms. Our modern education is still based and ran this way, and like I said, it's used by teachers, parents, our administrators, anybody with authority towards students and our young generation. Like I said, why is it so useful? It has the positive and negative consequences. Okay, so we're teaching kids the difference between right and wrong, rewarding them for their good behaviors, and having consequences for those bad behaviors. Now, here's your guys' time to think. This is what I'm looking for from you guys. As part of your discussion, at the end when you guys make your comments and read after you watch this video, I want you guys to give me your operant conditioning methods that you use in your classroom setting. What are your positive reinforcements? What are your negative reinforcements? Okay. Now, I teach PE. Me sitting here doing this presentation is completely different from me. I'm not used to being in a classroom. I'm out in a big open field, so my positive reinforcements and negative reinforcements may be different from yours. So I want to read what you guys have to say to see if there's anything that I can pull from it that I can use in my PE setting. Applications in the classroom. Like I said, every educator has their own system, and discovering what works for you is more important than anything else. I can't use what my classroom teachers use because I have a different setting for me, for PE. When my kids do things that they're supposed to do, they get rewarded on the Fridays. They get to enjoy the more choice time on their Fridays. If they don't behave during the week with my kids, I'd write down their name every single time they're making mistakes during the week, not doing what they're supposed to be doing. What I have found is the more I'm writing kids' names down, the more time they sit out on Friday, they've now learned, hey, I can't do this. We have a conversation. We talk to them about what they do wrong. They know to not do it again. And what I've noticed this year when I've applied this behaviors and this system is I have less and less kids in trouble on Fridays sitting out during PE when all these kids are having their free time. Now, we're able to do this because we have PE for 30 minutes every single day now. So therefore, those four full days during the week, they have to be on their best behavior, doing what is expected as a normal student. Every time they make a mistake, I write their name down. Like I said, what I've discovered is that after each week, towards the end of this year, I've had less and less kids every single day on Friday not being able to participate. Like I said, the other thing you have to know is what level of education are you teaching? A token system, probably not going to work with you secondary teachers, where you give kids play money so they can buy things from the school store or anything like that. Contracts, not going to work with elementary school level. Okay, kids aren't always going to understand these bad behaviors and what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong. Contracts work better with secondary. Okay, they can read better, they understand what they're reading, you explain it to them, they have them sign it. So anytime they start messing up throughout the year, pull out that contract and say, hey, remember, you signed this that you were going to improve your behavior. Now, from my feeling and from all these theories is that no amount of time or experience can perfect your methods. We have to be willing to change our methods every single year. Another strategy that kind of came from Pavlov's theory and what we can use as educators is this whole brain teaching method. Part of the theory of using the operant conditioning method in the classroom is we have to be able to use that whole brain teaching to successfully keep that classroom management, keep kids on task, keep them engaged, make sure we're punishing the right kids, rewarding the right kids in different ways. Because with this whole brain teaching, it's getting you to use all these different methods for certain kids. You can't use the same method on one kid that was used on the other. And that's where this whole brain teaching comes into play. For part of it is I use mimicking and gestures and physical responses. Those are going to be your best options. Okay. For me, PE, I have 45, 50 kids minimum at a time. Getting kids to, get attention right away doesn't work right away. I have to use 2 or 3 gestures. I tell them to clap once. I tell them to put their hands up in the air. Eventually, all the kids that are talking and not paying attention are going to see their classmates clapping. They're going to see them putting their hands up in the air. Classroom settings may be a little bit easier. I found that in a classroom setting, when I've done some observations, teachers like to use class, yes, yes, stuff like that. Now, how do we discover this? Like I said, clearly it's up to you. You have to find your own methods. You have to discover what works for you as an educator and the subject that you teach. What I use for PE may not work for somebody who teaches science in high school level. My conclusion. So, like I said, part of your discussion, I want to know what your positive and negative reinforcements are. As educators, we're in a huge global setting of what works. We discuss things. We always try to find new ways for our students. Again, do you change your reinforcements based on the subject area that you teach? Maybe you're like me. I only done PE for the last 3 years, so that's PE is all I know. Maybe you went from science to math. Maybe you went from art to teaching history. Did you change your methods when you decided to change subject areas? And last, I want to know is what have you guys discovered that works better than others? You know, that's a whole part of this experience of being an educator is you find what works, and you find what doesn't work, and you have to be willing to make those changes. So that concludes my presentation on Pavlov's behavior and social learning theories. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and let me know what you think.